Can you join me in welcoming Duncan, please? Duncan Humphreys, who's going to be talking about further aspects of the creativity that's situated in the 3D realm. Duncan.
Thank you very much for inviting me here today. It's always a great honour to speak at these 3D events. You tend to meet a lot of the same people, and sometimes you feel a bit like a recovering alcoholic on it. So I tend to believe now to say that, hi, I'm Duncan, I work in 3D. It's been 24 hours since my last 3D edit. I'd firstly like to say a little bit about Can. We were actually a pretty reasonable 2D production company before 3D came along and found us. It found us in many ways, and we've become known, probably wrongly so, as a sort of live sports 3D production company. And although that is something we have done some quite high-profile events in, it's actually not what we do. We do productions across a multitude of platforms and also productions across a multitude of genres, especially in 3D. And 3D has become obviously very big for us as a production company, but we haven't got there and haven't visited it without learning a little bit along the way. And as Julian said earlier, we are still learning. So I'd like to start with just showing you a quick short show reel. You have to excuse the quality a little bit because it's playing off side-by-side Blu-ray, but I think you'll get the general gist of what we do. So what I'd like to do is run you through a few case studies of productions that we've worked on over the last time. I'm trying to choose ones that are, noticeably different. And I like to start with the World Cup and finish with Wimbledon. They're not traditional sort of either documentary or factual, they're live sports, but it does give a really good indication of how far the industry had moved in that year. Our early history in 3D, let's be totally honest, it was all tests. We got asked to go to an opera in Rennes and shoot an opera in Rennes with Andy and Inishan, which we did, but it was most definitely a test. Channel 4 jumped in on the act with a quick sort of anaglyph season just before Sky launched their channel, which we took part in. But pretty much everything here was a test, the most important being probably the Usain Bolt, which you saw a clip of in the showreel, where for the first time I sat on a broadcast truck and I listened to hardened broadcast professionals go, that has just changed how I would cover the 100 meters. And I think from, for us and for a lot of people, that was quite a substantial point, that it actually changed how you would look at something in 3D. Probably the first of, the change from being sort of a, test scenario to being a real productions was the World Cup. It was a massive undertaking, very high profile. I'll give a quick sort of overview of it in a minute. I remember saying at the World Cup towards the end is that if we're shooting the World Cup in 2014 in 3D, 3D's here to stay. That's still to be decided, but hey, it seems to be going in the right direction. Since the World Cup and sort of slightly in the lead up, everything else has been commissioned programming. It's gone down a traditional tried and tested method of submitting proposals, looking at, what sort of productions work in 3D and broadcasters commissioning it in a traditional manner. All of these programs, most of them I will talk about later on, but, if you want to get if you've got an idea to get a live OB and you're talking to Sky, they like to do a truck deal, because they've got two of them. It's something that is very attractive to them. They don't want to do everything as a live OB, and they don't want to do everything as live music. But if you can come up creatively with ideas that involve it, they will look at it. The other projects, such as Wimbledon, involved It involved obviously Sony, it involved the BBC, but it also involved ESPN. ESPN had a vested interest in looking at making the 3D work because they had a channel. BBC wanted to, look at how 3D could be delivered to the home through the existing infrastructure. So all of these projects now were fully commissioned and through a pretty traditional model. 3D television has been sort of basically fed a diet of live sport, movies and some wildlife documentaries, all of which have got their place. I think we're now looking at a situation where creatively that vision is expanding. In the States, 3Net are looking at studio-based programming. What can we do? What can we do that is repetitious? How can we deliver program on a daily basis rather than just a sort of commissioned one-off? Is it changing our viewing habits? I would like to say yes. I don't think it is totally. I mean, I sit at home with a 3D screen, and I've got access to every 3D program that is going on. I don't watch everything in 3D. I don't pretend that anyone else will. Some games of some of Sky's football is better. Some of it, because of camera positions, isn't quite as good. So even I am selective about the 3D that I watch. What works? Most things work. I mean, the observational documentary following combat troops around, I don't think we're quite there yet, but most other things can work. The area where I get quite sort of animated is that we're always being asked to create high quality productions within a budgetary restraints. In 2D, that's quite an easy thing to achieve in the economies of scale. In 3D, that's much, much harder. What kind of content? I'm just a genuine believer in that basically a program should be immersive and engaging. It should be a story. If the story's bad, 3D isn't going to make it better. So creatively, don't just go and stick 3D on the end of a bad thing and pretend and think it's going to suddenly make it successful, because it won't. So get your story right, shoot it in 3D. If you're looking to doing a 3D production, shoot it in 3D. I really genuinely don't believe that Hollywood has done us any favours with putting a plethora of movies out there that have been converted to 3D and expecting us to buy it and pay extra at the cinema to go and watch it. 2D, 3D conversion, there are times when you need to do it, times you have to do it. It's editorially, if it's needed, if you're using archive footage, obviously. But don't go in and start with a premise that, I'm going to do my 25% as 2D to 3D conversion, because that's just sort of breaking away from, it's going to not give us the kind of productions that are going to engage the viewer. And also, not every program is going to work in 3D. You don't need, is the news, should you shoot the news in 3D? Probably not. So starting with the World Cup, it was an immensely high-profile production. We were going to get judged heavily on it, and I'll be totally honest, it was probably on the day before the first match that I thought we might just get away with it. It was not the easiest thing we ever undertook. It was obviously a Sony and FIFA production, which was given to HBS to run. Cannes were supplied the 3D layer to it. 25 matches live. That actually meant 3 matches every 4 days. Now, that had never been undertaken before in 3D with any system that at all. But 3 matches in every 4 days for 3 weeks. It was, a huge undertaking. We did major testing. We tested for 3 months. We adapted the Sony MPE. I think, if the Sony guys were here, they'd say in 18 months we did in 3 months we did 18 months worth of R&D. We flew 2 OB units out. We flew the nice Telegenic boys. I don't know if they're in here, but they were out there a minute ago. We flew Telegenic out to Durban. They had a very nice holiday. They weren't doing every other day. And then we flew the French truck, AMP, and the cruise to Johannesburg, who were doing 2 stadiums. At that time, there was little or no crew. The technology there was incredibly difficult to implement. What did we achieve? I would have said we achieved a very, very technical achievement. Creatively, I think we touched the surface on creativity of doing a football match. It is a football match, but there is a creativity involved in it. We touched the surface. What we achieved coming back from South Africa was a technical achievement. A totally different production was Little Crackers, a 12-minute short, the first drama that Sky commissioned. It obviously, in being a drama, it was going to involve lovies and actors and all of those lovely things that we all love to deal with in television and film, and that actually created a lot of issues. We had directors that had never shot 3D before. We had cameramen who had a little bit of experience in 3D. We had an art department that had never done 3D before. We were working on, as always, if you do anything in television, we were working on a limited budget and a tight schedule. But it was still going to be drama, and it was still going to be heavily criticised as such. One of the interesting things, there's a piece in our show reel which shows the table with 2 candles on it, and that was the art department's sort of effort to 3D. I tell you what we'll do: we'll stick 2 candles on the table. That'll look good. It's probably not the best shot, or not the best example of how to use 3D. So that whole process of delivering a drama, I think there's a lot more savvy people now. The whole industry has become much more 3D aware. But creatively, you were dealing with the whole the product as a whole. You were dealing with framing issues. You were dealing with drama looks. You were dealing with use of depth of field and how you best use that in 3D. The cameraman had a tendency, and in 2D this works really well, of putting objects in frame massively out of focus, and to try and talk him out of that was his default setting. I mean, he'd used those shots a lot, but to get him to not put those things out of focus things in foreground because it was distracting or it was breaking an edge violation, as Julian explained earlier on, and it was uncomfortable to look at, actually became quite difficult. The actual cutting techniques, I have this argument with so many editors who've never edited 3D that it is different to cutting 2D. You do have to cut with the depth. Julian was giving us some great explanations of how you can cut with negative space as long as you replace something in that space. But you have to look at it as a whole. And at that time when we first undertook it, it was being looked upon as a very much it's a 2D drama. Well, you can't actually look at it like that. A very different project was Safari Park Adventure. It was an observational documentary, essentially. We were asked to come up with something. How could we deliver 10 hours competitively with again, a limited budget? And our answer was, do something where it's contained a bit, where the 3D is contained a bit, where we're not having to go out to the Serengeti and travel 500 miles this way and then 1,000 miles this way. The answer was we wanted animals, so right, let's go to Woburn Safari Park, and we'll do the Safari Park Adventure there. And it turned into being, a big undertaking. We shot for 70 days in very much an observational style. One of the things I'm going to go on to talk about will show you how I would totally change how we shot that. But we shot in an observational style. We had on-location rushes viewing. We wanted, it was a non-linear program, so they wanted access to, day one's rushes for episode 10. It needed to be cost effective, and we were generating 4 hours of rushes a day. So creatively, I mean, before you can start thinking about creatively how you're going to deliver this, you need to think about technically how you're going to deliver it, because it really is going to massively affect how creative you can be. Had we shot on SRW tape, which is still my favourite source of record device, had we shot on that, that would have put about £180,000 on the budget, and at the time there was no SRW tape about, so that sort of answered that question. Had we used the traditional sort of record devices that were about at the time, just the level of they were all sort of designed for cinema usage, so the level of storage we would require was just vast and just totally sort of unmanageable in a sort of documentary environment. So we developed, we developed ways and means of combating this, and got to develop our own handheld rig, using mini cams so that it could be light and adaptable. It wasn't, let's be totally honest, it wasn't fully accepted by the cameraman, but it did get us shots that we couldn't have got in any other way at that time. We also then started to use a lot of GoPros, the 3D GoPros in there, because actually we were finding there weren't too many willing volunteers to get in the cage with the lion. So, and the GoPros, whilst they're incredibly limited in what they delivered 3 or 4 shots that you just sat back and went wow to. And if you ever want to know what it's like being eaten by a lion ate one. So, and I will be honest, the 3D was a tad strong when it was in his mouth, but up until that point, it was quite a dramatic shot. Literally, as we finished Woburn, we took on another project, which was to do a day at Ascot around a thing called British Champions Day. The film is being shown in April to selected audience, but it was quite an interesting thing. It was to cover all the great horses that were running, and one being Frankel, who is a wonder horse and unbeaten at the moment. But we undertook that in a very different way, and we managed to get our hands on this wee beastie. It's not the answer to everything. It's really, really good. The Panasonic one's the same. This happens to be, we've got a picture of the Sony one. But it isn't going to suddenly allow you to shoot everything that you want to shoot. It's very, very limited. But were we to take on Woburn again, we would unquestionably use one of these as a second camera, because it is portable, it is light. You can get places quickly, you can line it up quickly, you can shoot quickly. The one thing I would stress is just have someone behind it who knows what they're doing. Do not just assume that any cameraman will be able to pick that up and just go round and point it and it will just make good 3D, because it won't. Creatively, you need to think, people need to think about how to use it and how to maximize what they can get out of it. Final thing is, and the reason I use Wimbledon as an example in sort of wrapping up is because it was almost a year exactly between the World Cup in 2010 and Wimbledon in 2011. And it was like chalk and cheese. It was absolutely like chalk and cheese. I mean, we had the BBC, we had the All England Lawn Tennis Club, and Sony obviously, all working their hardest to get us as good at camera positions as we could. And we pretty much, other than one debatable position, which we had to move by a few feet, we got everything that we wanted. By then, there were lots of crew about. We trained crew at the World Cup. Suddenly, they seemed to grow on trees. That crew had a lot of experience. They'd shot 3D in lots and lots of different places. The workflow from literally the lens to the cameras to the fiber adapter that put everything down one fiber, not two, to the MPE, to the CCUs, to the record devices, absolutely everything had been improved, and it was just simply not a technical challenge. We put the cameras up, we switched them on, And although, JP and Richard over there would probably argue, they worked straight away. I mean, there was no worry about the technicalities. There was now tons of time to play with the add-ons. We had, graphics specially designed for it. The graphics were good. We got 3D Hawkeye working. Suddenly you had a richness and a texture and everything within that within that you expect from a live production. So the whole thing allowed the director to be creative. It allowed the director to talk about, production values and using those production values to the ultimate. That had happened in a year. The next break will be in documentaries and factual entertainment and feature films. It's becoming easier all the time to do this. It's still, yes, much easier to do a 3D production as a live because you have all the technology there to do it. So what would be my guidelines to doing a production? If you're doing what is now lovingly referred to as a 5D production, so you're doing 3D and 2D at the same time, consider the 3D first and then consider what you need to add to make the 2D. Why 3D? Why does it work in this medium? Have a look at what the productions you're either planning or thinking about pitching to broadcasters, and actually decide why you should make this in 3D. Not everything works in 3D. Not everything is going to be is going to allow you to, capture the same sort of moments as you can capture in 2D. So be very selective about what you look at doing in 3D. Once you've got through that, have early technical meetings. Plan and prepare. Julian was talking about storyboards. Obviously you can't storyboard a documentary or an observational doc, but you can have an idea about how you're going to approach any given situation to allow people to be creative, to allow you to get the best out of cameramen. To allow the director the freedom to express himself. If you make those plans, we're going to. I think the 2D world have become very, very, to a degree, lazy. You'd find, especially in the documentary world, you'd find a given situation. You'd give a man a 2D HD camera. You'd give him 10 rolls of stock and say, "Come back with something. Shoot the crap out of it." I'd say, but shoot it to bits, and then we'll sort it out in post. 3D, you don't sort it out in post. You need to have a plan of what you're going to do in post. You need to have a plan about how the show is going to look before you get there. And it's no good just putting these 2D values onto a 3D film. So is test footage essential? I'd say now, no, unless you're going to do something that's extremely different. We did some test footage on the thing we did just recently, the Alien Deep, because it involved underwater and cameras up at certain places, etc. So we did test footage on that, but actually on day-to-day filming, it's a pretty standard process now. Cut fast, again, as Julian said, you can, but get it right. Learn the techniques and then do it. Shoot in a documentary style, it can be done, but it's getting there. I wouldn't say you can do everything. It is a new medium. And it does involve a new way of thinking. I do get a little bored of people, I'm coming to a slide in a minute, which are my sort of pet hate sayings from crews, etc. It does demand a fresh approach. One of the biggest things I always hear is that the camera's, really big and it's really cumbersome and you can't do things and it's threatening to artists and all of these things. Well, that's Francis Ford Coppola, and that beast behind it weighs about 40 pounds more than any 3D rig, and that's on the set of The Godfather. Now, I don't think anyone sits there and says that The Godfather was lacking in performance or lacking in shot angles. We are dealing with an evolution. At the moment, we are in a position where, the rigs are big, they're slightly unwieldy, they're not easy to use. But that is changing, and it will rapidly change, and it will rapidly come to a place where it's far more accepted, and it's a far smoother process. Cameras will get smaller; they already are. We now have red epics that make the cameras half the size, the rig half the size it was before. The other things, the one thing, let's just try it. There is a word called physics, and you can bend it. You can move it, you can change the goalpost slightly, but what you can't do is break it. So slapping two cameras side by side and saying, well, we'll just give this a go, I can tell you that 9 times out of 10, giving it a go doesn't work. And then my final piece is give me some 3D. By that, I don't mean stick a load of stuff out of the screen. I really don't mean that. But what I'm getting frustrated at paying an extra £5 to go to the cinema to watch something that I can take my glasses off and actually watch pretty comfortably in 2D. It's not really, it's not actually, giving me much of a 3D experience. If we want this medium to survive, and if we want this medium to sort of, move forward, if you want someone to watch it in 3D, you've got to give them some 3D to look at. Otherwise, you're just going to, you'll find that, well, actually, it wasn't that good, and I'll probably rather watch the 2D version next time. And I think, again, I point the finger slightly at Hollywood there. I think there's been a lot of sort of very safe 3D productions, and I think it's time to start looking at, maybe widening that platform a little bit. Lastly, thank you very much. If anyone's got any questions, I'm happy to answer any questions you've got.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much, Duncan. That was a wonderful overview. I'm very fascinated you keep this smile on your face. For a person who's gone through many things, I'm sure there were odd dark nights of the soul in some of these sagas, but the smile has remained.
I think the dark nights and the looking at Soul was to the edit department on Woburn, because it was an absolute nightmare to do the online. I mean, it was a complete nightmare. There was so much material. Every show, there were 10 episodes being drawn from so much different material. It was horrendous.
Maybe we can hear a bit more about that sometime in the future. Questions, please. Yes, a second. I'll bring this mic over.
Hello. I just want to give some production feedback, because I was in a cinema in Norway watching the World Cup in the cinema in 3D. Everybody was allowed to bring in beer. You were not allowed to bring in vuvuzelas, but we could hear them really well. And everybody thoroughly enjoyed it. Everybody came in their Brazil shirts, and everybody was taking their shirts off and waving them around, and people were talking to each other. And I met some friends, so I was on the other side of the cinema. And I had some friends come over and pick me up, so we like crossing and being really annoying and walking in front of people. I dropped my 3D glasses, so I couldn't see the 3D anymore. So I thought, well, now we're going to do an interesting experiment, because in any cinema, people hate to talk to each other. So I said, okay, so I'm going to talk to the person next to me. I said, can you give the message to the person next to you and tell them to look for my 3D glasses? We successfully managed it, and everybody was in a good mood.
I mean, 3D at its best can be a truly immersive and enjoyable experience. And in business world, they talk about, I can't remember the exact term, but they talk about joint experiences. They it's what everybody is looking for. It's what social media is all about. And if you can deliver a product to a cinema screen as a live, I do genuinely believe there's only certain of those sort of situations. The World Cup final is obviously one, because everybody's interested in it. I think Wimbledon's another. I heard, I know a lot of people that filled a cinema in New York for the Wimbledon men's final, and had the same sort of experience. It can be done. That doesn't mean to say that happens for everything. We've looked at music and this, that, and the other. I'm not sure music works in the same vein. It could do, but yeah, I mean, it's a great experience when it does work. Yes.
Just wondering about documentary Did you find that you didn't want to commit with extreme 3D because you don't know what it's going to be cut against, and that's a problem?
I think that the trouble with the documentary and the way we had to approach it was that and especially if you took Woburn as an example, I mean that had to be very reactionary. You know, if a lot of animals died and a lot of animals gave birth on Woburn, and you know, if you're going to capture the giraffe being born in 3D, you don't know when it's going to happen. So you had to be very reactionary, and we had to be able to shoot objects a long way away. So I would say that from time to time we were probably safe, although we gave a 3D experience. But yeah, that was a different sort of documentary. We're doing one at the moment that's about the human body. That's far more, you know, shot designed. It's a documentary, but it's got a storyboard and it's got shot lists and etc. And that's far more sort of you can be far more expansive in the 3D. You can never in sort of the obs doc type scenario. You can never really account for what's about to come into frame, and invariably there's a tree or a bit of fence or another animal that's just about to ruin your shot. So, you know, people tend to sort of sit a little bit safer with the 3D. Yeah.
With Wimbledon and the World Cup, certainly with Wimbledon, was the 2D signal, was that taken from the 3D cameras?
No. I mean,
Completely
it would be a very brave. It's interesting the only place that has truly happened at the moment is it's happened on the US Open, where there was what is now lovingly referred to as a 5D production undertaken. And Sky, I believe, have trialled it, where the 3D cameras supply the 2D signal. At the moment, the way that rights work and the way that the outside broadcast works, it doesn't really lend itself to it. So you're not going to be able to talk, say, the BBC into sharing cameras, although we are in negotiation about possibly sharing a couple for this year. That's moving forward. You know, that's quite a big decision for. It also comes down to who takes control of that camera, who racks it, who white balances it. You know, and if you've got 8 cameras going through one truck and one camera having to go through another, how do you deal with that? It's not technically impossible, but it is. You know, it then becomes. It's my camera, no, it's my camera. So there is a little bit of that, but I think that's where we will head to, yes.
Oh, yes. Is there a microphone over there?
Yeah, my question is really related with the receptions about this 3D, the future. I mean, like in here at the moment, like yesterday, I heard, I was in a session, it's about related with the research of how's the children's perception about the 3D, how they accept this 3D. I mean, like there's a bit of mix at the moment whether this is really it's a bit mixed about the perceptions. My question is about what do you think about the future market, like in Asia? Do you think the reception, the way they accept this will be like a massive potential, or there will be like a mix, people cut half and half, they see like, oh, this is like, it's not something that's really going to be accepted generally?
I mean, look, unquestionably 3D is at a bit of a hiatus right now. And unquestionably it's at a place whereby everyone's sort of about to make judgments about it one way or the other. I fully accept that. And you know, there's a number of, you know, very big movies that are about to come out that I think will hopefully change our perception on 3D. I mean, we've got Prometheus, we've got Baz Luhrmann's The Great Gatsby, and we've got The Hobbit, all of which are going to be very well crafted, beautiful films, and let's hope that, you know, that can reignite the whole 3D movie side of things. As far as television goes, I think, you know, I'm a definite believer that manufacturers sold us a load of rubbish in the 3D TVs that they put to market. You know, my personal preference is for the LG glass polarized glasses screen. I think the shutter screens were an adaptation and simple. But I do believe that, you know, in as far as, you know, screens for the home go, the manufacturers don't have a lot to sell us right now. Yeah, they've got these 4K screens, but really, do you need 4K in your home is, you know, a different argument. Do you need glassless 3D in your home? Oh, that sounds a bit more interesting as a marketing tool. So yeah, I think you're going to see, you know, Toshiba have got one out. If you want to go to John Lewis and pay $7,000, you can walk away with a glassless 3D screen. It's not great right now, but it will be. They will get there. I think that the glassless 3D screens are probably going to be the tipping point for when it becomes, you know, more formally acceptable. If that's what your question was, I think.
And on that note, I'm afraid I think we've run out of time for this morning. Can you please join me again in thanking Duncan for such an interesting overview? Thank you.
Thank you very much.